good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time it is, when you hear this message, I pray that you're poised to receive, to accept, and to respond to words of wisdom. Hashem. Uh, when I was in my late teens, I came of age in the 80s, the mid late 80s, and in particular in the Los Angeles area in California. And so at the time, the gang culture was arguably at its pinnacle, right? It was just everywhere. The gang culture permeated everything that we did, especially as teenagers. And so you had to know where you were going. You're going to go to a party, you're going to go to a concert, you're going to go visit people. You had to know well what part of town you were going to, because even if you were not gang related, and we were not gang related, my friends and I, that is, every city was kind of assigned a de facto gang. And so our point man, who had the car and knew the LA area like the back of his hand, also somehow knew all the different gang affiliations. So we go to a party at UCLA, and he would be telling us, "Hey, okay, we're going to this party over here. These people are likely to be there. Those people are likely to be here. If anyone asks you where you're from, you're from Oxnard. We went to a party at USC. Oh, these folks are probably going to be there. It's a chance that those folks are going to be there. If anyone asks you where you're from Thousand Oaks. And so we had to be, careful about telling people where we were from, because we were from actually Pasadena, and Pasadena was associated with Bloods. Actually, we're from Altadena, right? So this is the how it gets dicey. Pasadena is a relatively small city, but you got Pasadena and Altadena. Altadena is more known as for Crips. Pasadena is more known for Bloods. So either way, you just had to know where you were going. You had to know what to tell people so you didn't run into trouble. And it was real, right? It was real. It wasn't fashion. It wasn't a fad. It wasn't, what I mean? It was serious. Like, you could get severely damaged. You could be robbed. You could die, right? You could die. And that, even though at the time I didn't really think about it, in retrospect, it gave me a real sense of like the relationship between identity and territory in real strong terms. It's beyond, say, a crosstown rivalry between sports teams, right? Because in our high school, we had our crosstown rivals. Anytime we played against them in a sport, it would be a big deal. But this was beyond that. The gangs were beyond that. And so it started to cultivate within me an appreciation of the relationship between identity and territory. Okay. And I realized over the years, the further I get into Orisha lifestyle, and I look at the spectrum of African American identity, and I realize how important identity is to our people, and I see some of the gaps and the inconsistencies between what we proclaim and how we want to represent a culture and our understanding of what we're doing. So it always comes to a head when I see people, African American people, proclaiming other people's cultures, right? And we don't want to accept it that way. We don't want to acknowledge it as such. Okay. And so part of it isn't just that we are trying to appropriate people's cultures, and we don't want to acknowledge that. A lot of it has to do with our perception of what culture actually is, and our perception of what identity is really based on. And so, for example, a huge thread in African American identity is Christianity. Even people who don't profess Christianity so strongly are brought up with, like, that is a driving force of our community. That's a rallying point. It's a central, organizing principle of African American culture and identity is the church. Okay, and so our identity is organized according to the same kinds of reasoning and logic that we use as Christians. And Christianity is totally abstract. Heaven and hell are completely abstract. All of the people in the Bible, totally abstract. Totally. Nobody came up thinking that they were related to David or Jonah or Moses or any of those people. No African Americans believe themselves to be blood related to any of the characters in the Bible. And the locations in the Bible are not places that we go to. They aren't places that we're familiar with in general. This mountain, that garden, this hill, that place, those are just abstract concepts. And so everything about our religious identity, where we get our focus and our orientation and our sense of reality, everything about it is abstract. That conditions your thinking. That conditions you to a formulation of reality that can be based on abstractions and hypotheses. And the Western educational system only reinforces that because you learn about all this stuff far, far away in a distant time that you don't quite understand why you're learning it and what it means. So, regardless of the fact that you don't necessarily know history or you don't necessarily know math or you don't necessarily know grammar, your mind is conditioned to accept abstractions as reality. Everything about your knowledge base is abstract based on your education and your religious experience. This is really important. This is something that I know as a teacher. Okay. This is something that I know as a teacher. More important than the content is the reasoning, the way you formulate your reality. That's the byproduct of the educational and religious experience that you have. So, when you look at actual territory and actual power and actual identity, you don't know the relationship between the church and city hall and the police department and the school. These things are also very abstract. There's no direct line that you can, draw between who is the head of the church in your town and who's the mayor of your town and who's the chief of police and who's the superintendent of schools and who's the congressman and the city councilman, and like those things they're abstract. How they fit together is totally abstract. But these are the people who are making the decisions that define what kind of work happens, who, does what, who lives where, et cetera, et cetera. All of this I'm saying is that I understand why we formulate our identity the way that we do. It's very, very abstract. That works in your favor in a certain way because it allows you to extrapolate and it allows you to create certain kinds of models and patterns for a reality that can make you, it's easier for us to relate. Let me put it that way. As a result of our educational and religious experience, it's easier for African Americans to have a conceptual Pan-Africanist worldview. That's the benefit. We can see the relationships and the similarities between ourselves and all people, right? It allows us to be very adaptable and flexible and able to fit in a lot of different environments. And when we choose to focus on Black people, we can see the similarities and the unifying principles of Black people all over the world. Okay. So that's a benefit. And that's part of what I think brought us into African centered thinking, Afrocentrism, however you want to term it, and allowed us to really dive into it. Right. Afrocentric thinking gave us a real solid understanding of the global African experience. Great. The shortcoming, however, is that we are really fuzzy about the relationship between the history and the identity of the people and the territory that those people occupy and the actual day-to-day life that reinforces a person's relationship to the territory over generations. That part we don't really understand. That part is really, really weak. We underestimate and undervalue the concrete geographic significance of identity or how identity is formed. That's why I refer back to the gangs, because for me, that was like one of the real pointed examples that I have in life of understanding. Oh, this is what happens when a person says that they live in this area and this is their territory. Ultimately, it boils down to your affiliation with another group of people who hasn't all have agreements with one another, and based on those agreements, it defines their relationships with other groups of people, and those relationships are upheld through physical force. Okay, so when you hear someone say, you don't get the culture that you proclaim, you get the culture that you practice, you get the culture that you permit, you get the culture that you protect. When you look at a gang, that's what goes on, right? It happens in other places, but that's my most pointed example. This is our territory. If you cross into that territory and you don't belong there, it's going to be a problem. Okay. And so when I hear my people say, oh, um, black people, the original Egyptians are black. Okay, that's fine. And then I'm black as an African American. Okay, fine. But then the problem becomes, well, because they're black and I'm black, we're the same. We are related. And then you get people saying we are the original Egyptians. And those people who are there now are interlopers, they're imposters, they're fraud, they're invaders. That now you're running into problems. When you say we are the original Hebrews, because blacks were the original Hebrews and I'm black, I'm the original Hebrews. You guys are fraud. That's now you're running into problems. We are the original Mayans. There's people out here talking about they're the original Mayans, black people, African Americans. We are the original Olmecs, so on and so forth. Simply because they're using this reasoning, this abstract reasoning, and it ends up being a fallacy, right? Where you're creating a false equivalency. I am black, Egyptians are black, so all blacks are Egyptians. No, no, not at all. We are not in any way, shape, or form related to the Egyptians. That's just historical fact. But more urgently, what I want you to understand is that the Egyptians are tied to a land. They have an army, right? So this is what I want you to start thinking. If you really believe that you are something and you're going to proclaim some culture, you're going to protect it and you're going to permit certain things and not permit other things. Are you ready, willing, and able to go into Egypt and occupy territory and protect it and only permit certain kinds of behaviors to happen in that territory? Are you prepared to go to Israel? You're a Hebrew. You're going to go to Israel, and you're going to occupy a certain territory with all your people, and you're going to protect that place, and you're only going to permit certain kinds of behavior in that area. Is that what you're talking about? How long can you hold that space? At what rate can you expand that territory? See, because if you can't do that, what you're doing is at the very least, excuse me, you're just not being taken seriously by the people who are doing that. See, because the other people are doing that. All other people on the planet are acutely aware of their relationship to territory. and they are equipped to protect that territory and to permit or not permit certain kinds of behavior within that territory. That is the thing that I want my people to grasp and hold on to tight. The Egyptians, the ones that you may refer to as invaders and blah blah blah, well, they are the occupying force of that land today, right? And so they are already defending their borders. They're already there. You see what I'm saying? They're all these people who you're talking to are already tied to the whole power structure of that land. Okay. So if you are not prepared to go into their neighborhood and take over a space, you need to be mindful of that. Just like you wouldn't go into the 60s. This is an area you wouldn't go to Grape Street in LA and say, I own this block. This is my block because my great 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 grandfather is from Grape Street. And so all of y'all who just moved here right now and claiming Grape Street, y'all are all frauds. You're not gonna do that. You're not. If you do, you're not gonna live to tell the tale. You're not gonna live to tell the tale. Try it. Try it. Just try going to Grape Street. Just try going to the jungle. Just try going, let alone trying to proclaim that you are the original and everybody else is a fraud. Just try it and see what kind of results you get. You guys got to think that way a little bit more, because this is, for some people, this is their true basis of their identity. It's not about things that they've read. It's not about concepts. It's not about ideas. It's about real power, right? And if you are truly tied into anything, any kind of real claims, what you also are talking about is you're potentially interfering with their livelihood, their their inheritance. There's a lot at stake. Potentially, if anyone takes you seriously, there's a lot at stake. You just got to understand and evaluate what you're saying, right? So that if you truly believe it, then you would choose your position more carefully and more strategically. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm aspiring to. I'm hoping to awaken within the population, particularly the leaders, people who are really committed to improving the world through positive influence. If you're one of those people and you understand what I'm saying, then I want you to find out how the Orisha Lifestyle Academy can help you take your practice, not your ideas, not your concepts and abstractions, your day-to-day practice to the next level. Visit me at obafemio.com or orishalifestyle.com and let's start working. Let's do it. Let's put in some work for the hood that will help you live the medicine to heal your life and heal the lives of those who you are destined to serve. I look very eagerly to working with you. Bye for now. Odabo.